In your seats, come on, boys. Let's get this show on the road. Thank you. Good morning. I would like to welcome everyone to this meeting of the Joint Waste Disposal Board. Please note that the meeting is being broadcast and recorded. The board is today together at Wokingham Borough Council, with some officers joining online. Firstly, are there any apologies?
I have apologies from Councillor Harrison.
You can see from the video feed that all members expected are present, we hope. Yes, we can take that in. The full text for declaration of interest is set out in the agenda at item 2. If any member has a disclosable pecuniary interest of any affected interest to declare, please indicate and I will come to you in turn. Thank you. There are no declarations, but may I remind everyone that you can make a declaration at any time should it occur to you at a later point. Anyone declaring a disclosable pecuniary interest will need to leave the meeting when we get to that relevant item. Okay, moving on. The next agenda item 3, pages 5 to 12, is to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting of the board held on the 9th of January 2023. Please indicate if you have any issue with the accuracy. No? Anyone? Oh, yes.
I have a small correction, Chair. The spelling of our Assistant Director, Francesca Hobson, not Hodgson, please. It's in the list of officers, and just a couple of paragraphs later, it is correctly spelled. So if we could have a small correction, please.
Of course. Thank you very much. Are there anything with regards to the paperwork in itself? Are there any matters arising from the minutes? Well, most of it, I presume we would be talking through anyhow through the meeting itself, yes. Moving along, the next item on the agenda is agenda item 4. To consider any urgent items. Are there any?
No, none notified, Chair.
Thank you. Move my papers. Face. Agenda item number 5, that's pages 13 to 24, is the RE3 progress report. Oliver Bird, please, would you present the report? And Sarah, I'm sure, will do the work for you. Thank you.
Yes. So, as usual, we've started with our usual review of the performance statistics. So I presented the figures, the full year figures for last year alongside the figures for April to January of this year. In the appendices, you've also got some graphs in which I've broken down the tonnages and the recycling rate by quarters. So you will notice that the recycling rates for all 3 councils are still slightly below where they were last year. The tonnages for quarter 3 were slightly less different than we'd seen in earlier quarters of the year. Obviously, when it comes to the next meeting in June, we will have full year data for this year, 2022 to 23. So my plan would be to present a full breakdown of the figures at that point. However, the thing that sticks out at the moment is still the compostable waste and the fact that we've got fewer tonnes of food waste and garden waste than we had done previously. Are there any questions about recycling rates?
Just coming to that question, do you think it's because people have been more cautious of what they're buying as well, that the tonnages of people are making something of savings?
Yes, so I'm sure that the cost of living is having an impact on the tonnages. Obviously, in Reading and Bracknell, the food waste collections have been in place for a good few months and years now. So people may also be getting used to these collections and understanding that they're wasting a lot of food that they could be saving.
Just following on something that Monica, so it isn't a bad news story in itself that the tonnages are down. We are doing the good things, but therefore also how well people are taking it on board, that we may have to put something into that, Monica, at some stage. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so next on the agenda was about waste tracking. So as you may be aware, all local authorities have to report waste data to the government via a system called Waste Data Flow. Through that system, we have to report the number of tonnes that we collect and what happens to all of those tonnes. From the end of this year or potentially sometime next year, that system is going to be replaced alongside replacement of a lot of other systems, so that all this data from lots of different sources is brought together in one place, and it should also provide some real-time information. So DEFRA is currently working through exactly how that system will function. So at the moment, it's a bit unclear what the implications will be in terms of our data entry and monitoring our performance going forward. So the update in the report really is just to say that we will seek to be part of the discussions as that process develops in order to understand these implications a bit more fully. Any questions on that one? No, okay. So the next thing was about WeBanks. So as you will recall at the last meeting, there was a request for us to look into options to collect small electrical appliances from banks. So since that point, I have spoken to a couple of other local authorities who use banks for that purpose. I've also looked into how a service could operate in the RE3 area. And we have submitted an expression of interest in relation to some funding. So as you will have seen from an email earlier this week, our expression of interest was successful in getting us to the next stage of the application process for the funding. So if members are happy for us to go ahead and complete that process, we will need to put together some more information about exactly how our project will work, including all the expected benefits. So we'd be interested in getting any thoughts of members about exactly where banks could be situated in order to maximise these benefits. When we wrote our expression of interest, there were four main factors that we considered. So the first is that we would want to put banks in places where there would be a reasonable footfall in order to make sure that we got some decent tonnages from the banks. The second would be making sure that we put the banks somewhere visible and with good lighting. The aim of that being to try and minimise the risk of fires and vandalism. Next one was about putting the banks at existing glass bank sites. That should help with minimising the amount of extra monitoring that would be needed for the banks. And the fourth one would be about situating the banks in places where residents perhaps are less likely to have cars and would find it harder to get to the recycling centres with these items. So I will hand over to you for discussion, but I also have some pieces of paper to hand out to you which have got a photo which would show what our banks would look like if we were to go ahead.
Thank you, Sarah. Any questions on that? Yes, Tony.
Sorry if I've missed this, but the bid, if approved, it hasn't been approved in totality, has it? So we're just going through a sift. If it's approved in totality, how many individual banks would it sustain?
So we have based the expression of interest on us having 30 banks in total, which would be 10 banks per authority. So yes, we've got some meetings coming up in the next couple of weeks in which we'll need to finalise the details of exactly what it is going to cost us to have these banks, and those figures might need to be adjusted slightly. But yes, we're aiming for sort of 10 banks per council.
That's good, because if we get that number for each authority, we can each look at a cross section of sites, and certainly looking at some of our, I mean, for example, Tesco's on Portman Road, where we've got where we've got a large footfall that walks as well as drives, and a number of other sites, and you've obviously got different geography to look at. So I think, well, I've no doubt. I don't know whether, through you to Andy, I don't know how much thought officers have already given to the sorts of sites that could be used. But I think that's well worth. I mean, the issue of fire is obviously. I mean, that applies to a range of existing banks. Closed banks, for example, can be set alight. I'm not aware that we've ever had any problem. So I think it's obviously an issue, but I certainly wouldn't use that as an excuse for not pursuing this.
Yeah, I think what our next step is now is go out and review all of our sites and see where we've got sufficient space. And as Councillor Page has mentioned, where we think it'll have the most benefit in terms of where people are having to walk or have got less access to the HWRC. So we'll do that review and then report back to the 2 lead members with some recommendations, and also make sure they borough wide as well.
Thank you, Andrew. I concur with you, Tony, because on the 11th of March, I'll be standing at the Leisure Centre in Bracknell with the team, and we are on that particular day. And no joke, we have sometimes up to 4 skips brought there. And it's, it is something I very much concur with, that we can look at the sites. And I know we've got a Tesco's in Warfield that if we were able to put them in, I'd be putting them in there tomorrow, literally. And I thank Sarah for the work she's doing on this article.
Yeah, okay. Yes, so we've got one more thing to do before we get to the next page. Yes, so the next bit on the agenda was about plastic films. So again, this was something that you asked us to look into at the last meeting. So following that discussion, I have been talking to the Flex Collect project team. So Flex Collect is a project that supports a small number of local authorities to trial the collection and recycling of plastic films. And following on from those discussions, FCC is going to be doing some testing in the MRF to find out, if we were to collect plastic films from the curbside, how and where in the MRF process those could be extracted. Yes, these tests are going to be taking place over the next week or 2, and then depending on how those go, we can then potentially have some discussions about if, how, where a trial could take place at the curbside. Are there any questions on that one?
Would it be a separate, or that it would go into the same sort of recycling container on the roadside? It's just one thing that I'd always look at is the amount of boxes or bags or things that we are giving our residents. Something of that.
Yes, so if it went ahead, it would go into our existing recycling containers.
Yeah. Any other? No.
Okay. Yes, so the next thing then is about the translation of the booking form. So obviously this is something we've discussed previously in relation to digital exclusion. And I can confirm that as of Tuesday evening, the translation option is now live on the booking system web form. And that is what you've got on the second page of your handout. So it's just some screenshots showing where the sort of drop down list is. And then essentially what it looks like when it's translated. So it does translate all of the introductory text, all of the questions, all of the confirmation text. Yes. Any questions on that one?
Yes, Karen, please go ahead. Thank you, Chair, and I'd like to thank Sarah for that and getting that online so quickly. I guess I don't know whether you could, perhaps it is all Google Translate, right? And I don't know about any legal ramifications should some of those Google translations be off, which is something that Google Translate can do. And it's something I know we're thinking about in the council with different communications too. But my concern will be, and as grateful as I am for this, and I think this will get us a lot further down the road, I'm still concerned when a can becomes can't, you know. Boy, my American and my English are always confusing. But if you understand what I'm saying, sometimes Google Translate can do a real wallop on that. So I just wanted some kind of clarification on that. Thanks.
Yes, so we are using Google Translate. And yes, I'm sure there probably are some cases where it doesn't translate as accurately as we would like it to. The benefit of using Google Translate is that it can translate into many, many different languages. If we had gone down the route of sort of using a team within the council to do the translations, we could have only had a maximum of 6 language options. So that's why we opted for the Google Translate option. We have put an FAQ onto the RE3 website about the translations to let people know that, yeah, there may be errors in it, and it is a third-party system. And if they're unsure about the content, they should refer back to the English content where they're able to. But yeah, happy to take any other advice on managing that.
Is it translated to American?
But
Chairman, I think it's a really interesting exercise in accessibility because it will make us write in English in a way which translates better, if that's even a good sentence. But I think we often use turns of phrase and things like that. I forget which one it was. Was it a sign written van that you were looking at the other day, you two, that didn't translate very well into whichever language? It made something different. We assume that everyone's going to know what a sign written van is. So I think it will help us. And I think that's a piece of, well, someone who's got, Joe Blogs painters and decorators is a sign written van. There we go. So, but no, I think it's a good point that, and also for the Wokingham and Bracknell contingent here, if you work for a place that's called Reading, I think Monica found that it translated as reading the other day. So.
Yeah, it's been sorted, so it's okay. So I just wanted to add that we can do contribution to the Google Translate as well. So what we're going to do, we're going to reach out to native speakers for the top languages to have a quick flick through our page, just to make sure that it's not obvious errors. But yeah, I think, by placing the disclaimer on the website, we hopefully, letting people know that inaccuracy could happen. But we will try to make sure that at least the top few languages that we know that, living in local areas will be checked.
And that work should be ready for March already.
It's already live. It's already right.
The importance of it. Yep. Okay. Well, that is something that I, as you know, with the booking system, even if the press thing went a little longer than it should have to get out, it's there now, and we are doing a good job on that one. It continues.
Okay, so next on the list was the link between booking systems and fly tipping. So you'll be aware that this is something we have talked about previously in relation to RE3. In the meantime, DEFRA have also been funding a project to look at this link on a wider scale. So they employed a third party to speak to a variety of councils, including RE3. They looked at some fly tipping statistics, and they also undertook a review of academic literature. And they published the findings of that work in January. So their report concludes that they couldn't find any evidence of a link between booking systems at recycling centres and fly tipping. They conclude instead that it was probably the pandemic itself that affected any fly tipping statistics rather than the booking systems, which were obviously introduced at much the same time. Any questions on that one?
Just watch the white van man and their booking systems. That's one of our problems there, I think, more than anything. No.
Just going to ask if you could, but I've just done a quick Google and I think I brought the report up. So but oh yes, HWRC booking systems and incidents of fly tipping, research into possible links, technical report for
That's the one.
That's the one.
But we can circulate it if you'd like it circulated.
I think it would be helpful, certainly for some of our colleagues who
I was just going
still
to say,
remain obsessed.
the ardent few, it is something that we can say. The meeting today was very, very enlightened, and you might like to look at this.
Yeah, indeed.
Thank you.
Not to say, Chair, that we won't keep an eye on what's going on.
Yeah.
Just because there's a report out, it doesn't mean we're job done.
It's
Okay, so the next thing was just a quick thing about reuse. So this obviously follows on from the discussions we had at the last meeting and the presentations that we had from FCC. So really, it's just a case of us trying to seek some clarity about which of the options you would like us to do some more research on and provide a further report on. So there were a list of things that I included in the report. There may be others that you're interested in as well. So yeah, I'll just hand over to you if that's all right.
Do we take into perspective that cafes and such that I was speaking to Monica about on reuse?
So I did put reuse workshops on the list of things we could consider.
Yes, Karen.
Thank you, Chair. The list of 5 items that you put forward, I was going to only select 4 or whatever, but I sat down there and ticked all 5 that I thought were actually worthwhile. I do have a little bit of a reservation about permanent reuse shops and libraries, which will be great and will elicit a lot of good recycling and upcycling action. However, my concern becomes with those sites that there is just always that residual stuff that never gets picked up. And does it become, I don't want to use the word dump, but I'll use the word, does it become, something that we're just going to have to clear, and how would that be taken care of? I suppose the research might lend some light on that.
Recycling or fly tipping, I did speak to Oliver about this just now because I attended on Saturday, the 25th of February, the Crowthorne, or the Crows they're called, a repair cafe, which they held in a community centre, and people were able to bring items which they wanted repaired or could be used again. And it was quite interesting, the amount of persons that come, and things like sorting out the tables, or the community people that came along. There were watchmakers and such which were prepared to repair and help. But one of the questions is, when there's something that can't be repaired, and maybe it's a large piece, they don't want to take it home. And, they don't want to walk back with it or put it in the car. So I did bring this up to Oliver, and he said, well, if we speak with, I explained to Monica and found out whether our group would have other parishes and that would have community centres rather than libraries, but an organised setup. But people were having coffees, having a chat, what they had to. It might be something we can take on. Again, over to you, Monica.
Yeah, if I may. So I think we are in a very good position at the moment because all of the councils have own repair cafe at the moment. Reading Repair Cafe is a well-established cafe, so several years, and they're very grateful. When I reached out to them, they would be very keen to collaborate. And at the moment, it's since last year, it's a Spencer Woods Repair Cafe as well. So we have establishment as well and community organizing themselves across Wokingham, and obviously now since Saturday we have the place in Bracknell as well. So I think we are in a very good position to work much more collaboratively with Free places and help them out to promote it, because obviously any less waste to us, and also the just promoting awareness of the repair and the fact that things can be repaired and not purchase a new one and straight away place in recycling the broken item. It's something that it could be very beneficial. So our aim would be to definitely look into this further. I don't think we got a very well written at the moment strategy for repair. Obviously, we've been talking a lot about the reuse, but definitely repair should be featured there going forward as well. So if members are happy, I'll be very keen to pursue any further collaboration and a bit more closely promoting repair cafes locally. Yeah.
You've got me on side. I'm sure we can. Yes, Karen. Yeah, good one.
Charges, yes, they're next. Yes, so as you will be aware, we charge householders to dispose of some construction and demolition waste at the recycling centres because it's classed as a non-household waste. We also charge the traders who use the recycling centres to dispose of most of their waste. So our current prices are designed to fully recover the cost of handling and disposing of that waste. However, because of rising costs, we would need to put our prices up from April if we wanted to continue to fully recover our costs from next year. So you've got a table in the reports in which the full set of proposals is presented. You will notice that these proposals include a recommendation to increase the price for soil and rubble for all users, to go back up to £3 per 25 litre bag. Yes, I think that was all I was going to say. So, yes, any questions on that one?
Yes, Karen.
Sorry, I'm just full of questions this morning. I suppose one of the more awkward things that we find often that's fly-tipped, I guess, are attractive things like toilets, sinks, bathtubs, partial showers, and things like that. And I assume that becomes a bulky waste residual or bulky residual item, which is listed under businesses. Now, where I particularly live in a very transient area with a lot of HMOs and landlords that are trying to quickly replace something and will often fly tip those items. Where does that fall out? Are those kinds of items in the bulky residual, and how does that affect a private resident that may just switch out a sink or a toilet?
Yes, so if a resident comes to the recycling centre with a toilet or a bath, if they are sort of ceramic, then they would fall under the charges for rubble. I'm not sure how they are collected in terms of the bulky waste collections and whether there is a separate charge for these. We could look into that.
Yes, something the officers might want to take up. Yes, Clive.
Thank you very much, Chair. I don't want to increase the charges for rubble or soil, certainly not for residents. Businesses, perhaps, but for residents, no. I'd rather it was left at £2.50 or even taken away completely. We've consistently said that residents shouldn't be charged for this. I think we've done that for 4 years, maybe 5, and the position doesn't change.
Well, that's noted, but I'll move over to Oliver.
I think the only thing really could say from an officer point of view is that these charges are there to cover the cost. There's no profit element. If we, as Sarah intimated, the price dropped for those items recently, but has, in common with lots of other things, had to go back up again. And none of this, Councillor Jones, is to contradict what you're saying. That's noted, obviously. I suppose I'm just giving the background to why these charges come in. So these are charges which are levied to the person doing the work and presumably benefiting from the the good outcome that will come from the works that they're doing, rather than levying it against council taxpayers as a whole. That's the justification that the board has previously given and the councils. And again, I would just add that those charges going up, where Sarah and Jane have calculated that they need to go up, that is because that's the cost the councils will be charged for disposing of those items. There is, as the report says, an element of rounding up, and that's, as Sarah explains, that's where some prices haven't gone up, because in actual fact, the inflationary increase in the cost that we will be charged doesn't exceed the previous rounding up, which the board deemed would be sensible from the point of view of just charging a round number. So where the proposed price is different, that is just to cover the costs. And again, none of that is to in any way contradict what you said, but just to explain the situation as it stands. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you for the explanation, Oliver, but position doesn't change. I'd still rather that it was left at £2.50 for rubble and for soil, and really in time taken away.
I mean, I have to say that I would concur with supporting the cost on this and the cost hike. We're not talking about making a profit here. We're simply talking about maintaining the status quo and covering the cost, as Oliver explained. And unfortunately, if we were not to take those costs, then that would be an impact that would be passed on to all of us. So I think they do need to remain. And again, back to my other question, if you're lumping all the toilets and sinks and everything else into that rubble, you know, I'd like a little more research into that. Those are problems that we have. So
I could report back on what the income is like next time, if you like, that we're receiving at the moment from those, if that would help.
Tony, go.
I understand where clients are coming from, but we can't just unilaterally depart from a policy that we've had without a more comprehensive report and setting out the impacts of that. I mean, we would all like to see elements of the service free, but you know, you can't just knock it on the head. I realise that there are local issues and pressures, but I think we should have a fuller report on the implications of that sort of change. And frankly, as Karen said, the costs of that we're talking about are actually fairly minimal set against the work that no doubt generates that rubbish or rubble. So I'm happy with the report coming back, but certainly we couldn't just agree not.
Well, if we finish the paper, which is, and then when it comes to the recommendations, we can put that in the recommendations and deal with it from there. Is that okay?
Very happy to have a paper to look at it in the future.
Yeah, in the future.
Yeah.
But we can, yes.
Very happy, but in the meantime, still not happy with an increase of 250 to 300.
It'll be noted in recommendation then that we will be coming back, but let's finish off the paper first then. Okay, thank you.
Okay, yes. So next on the list was user satisfaction survey. So obviously you'll remember that we spoke at the last meeting about the statistical results from the survey that we did in the autumn. Since then, we've analysed the comments and recommendations for improvement that came back from the residents. And you've got a summary of the things that residents said in Appendix 2 of the progress report. Alongside these things that residents said, we put together a list of actions and responses. So some of those actions are already complete or underway. Others we've started liaising with FCC about, and we just need to do some finalising on the details and the timescales. So we will keep you updated as we progress with those. Are there any questions on anything in the table?
See no questions.
Nope.
Do
Okay.
go ahead, Sarah.
Good. So the next thing then was about the community compost scheme. So at the last meeting, members agreed to relaunch the scheme in the spring. You will remember that during the first phase of the project, we said that there would be a certain number of bags of compost available over a certain number of months. However, what we found was that the number of requests was actually quite manageable. Therefore, to make things a bit simpler this time round, I would propose that we allocate the compost on a first come, first served basis, assuming that the groups meet our advertised criteria. And yeah, that should save some of the emails going backwards and forwards. So yes, are members happy with that proposal, or would you prefer to do it as we did previously?
Well, I can say that I know the schools, and we're very grateful. We were able to have a lot of community volunteers would come in and teach children gardening. It was amazing. I've gone around carrots and what came in. I'm very grateful for what happened there, and I would recommend it to all members to get the message out there. Literally. Thank you, Sarah. That being the end, let's look at the recommendations which are on. Oh yes, the agenda setting, which is important because come June, I would love to see all our smiling faces, but it was important. But I think we should be dealing with that now. Okay.
Chairman, I think it's just a discussion between members about when, given that you've got the elections in between now and the next meeting, when would members prefer to have the agenda setting meeting on this occasion? And I suppose in general thereafter, where would that best position? Do we want it very soon after the meeting, at the end of the meeting, in advance of the meeting before? I would turn over to the members because you've probably got a lot more experience of these sorts of things than I have. So
are you saying we should have it straight after the meeting now? No, Tony.
Chair, I'd envisage that just one member from each authority would be involved in this. I certainly don't want to be involved in agenda setting. I have every confidence in Karen, so and I would nominate her to deal with that.
I'd just say
agenda setting doesn't normally involve all. So I think we should decide amongst each authority who wants to undertake it, and then those three can meet either after the meeting or unless of course there's a lack of confidence in other authorities that they both have to be there.
Always got the answer.
Not at all. You make a really good point, Tony, and that isn't really the intention. I think, as we discussed last time, I think we're looking at maybe a half an hour meeting online. It's just making sure it fits in with everyone's diary and you feel it is in the best position for you, whether you feel that agenda setting is about setting the work that officers are going to do for the period between the meetings, or whether you would prefer to have it nearer to the next meeting to kind of build things up. And it's really that's all it's about, really.
Chair, my preference would be to have it a little bit closer to the meeting. I think that we all kind of leave with a set of tasks and there's a general knowledge, a healthy knowledge after one's through with the meeting of what kind of needs to be carried forward. And so, but the point is that other things arise during the course. So my preference would be to have it a little bit closer to the meeting, just ensuring that we've got everything on record. It's the way I like to work, but others may defer.
No, well, Ian, yes.
Yes, I would agree. Things can come up quite quickly.
Yes.
3 months between the actual board meetings, there's plenty of time for subjects to come up that we don't perhaps envisage 3 months prior to that. So a meeting closer to the board meeting would be more beneficial.
Okay, well, we'll put it that it will be before the June meeting. Hopefully it will be our smiling faces, but if not, I'm sure you will educate. Having said that, you've noted that then, yes, and it'll be live with Ofsted, fine. Okay. Okay, shall we go to the recommendations on page 13? Having now stated about the pricing, can I take it just as a thought? This is supposed to come into the 1st of April. Yes. If we take it that maybe there is 1 or 2 items on there, that the one with regards to thing that we brought back a progress, but do you want to take the others as all standing? Something like that in the recommendation, and the papers come back after, and it was just, or are you wishing to keep it just the same prices right the way through? Or how would you like to go with that, Karen, with yourself? And the others, yeah.
We can do it.
Yeah. The officers then can deal with it for you.
So residents won't be charged an increase from the 1st of April.
On the 1st of April, they would be charged an increase on the others that we are quite happy with.
They're
But
all
your-
businesses.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
businesses,
Yeah.
that would go into place, but
Yeah.
with regards to the CERNAV, we can leave that to the officers to bring back a report for the next meeting. That would remain at this point in time. Is that how we would see it, Oliver? Unless you want to go.
However you feel as a group, you
Yeah.
want us to go, we can, the
Yes.
proposal is to change the prices or not change the prices. So I suppose if we take it line by line, we can choose which ones. But again, that would just be for members to agree.
I think at this point, I think there was only one. It was the soil and
It's 2, rubble and soil to remain at £2.50, which for residents.
the officers then could come back at the next meeting and say whether it was different, but everything else would increase.
Increase because that's all for businesses.
Yes, yes, but that was, I wanted it out there so you were in agreement to that
Yeah.
part. Is that okay with that, Oliver? Yes, okay, yeah, good. Then we have the recommendations on page 13, 2.1 to 2.6. And we need to move and agree recommendation plus the alterations we've requested. Is that okay? Yeah, all happy with that? Fine, thank you. And then we come to agenda item 6 is for the RFU Communications report. It's Oliver, isn't it? I hope. On pages 25 to 36, please would you present the report, young man?
Chairman, I'm going to do what I did before, which is to hand straight over to Monica.
Thank you.
Over to Monica.
Thank you, Chairman and Oliver. So just to follow up on the regrow community scheme, so pleased to hear that the recommendation being approved. So we are almost ready to extend this scheme to organizations and schools. So following that meeting, very shortly, I will distribute the drafted press release, and officers will receive as well the plan for social media, how we're going to promote the scheme this year. And we have a brilliant stories to talk from last year. So we have a lot of materials, lots of brilliant comments and feedbacks and story that we're going to regularly publish using our channels. So I'm hoping that we will be able to reach out even more organization. At the moment, as it stands, we worked with 69 organizations and schools benefited from the project. Over 100 bags been distributed. So I think it's a brilliant thing, and a lot of people really complimented help and were really grateful. As Chairman mentioned, a lot of it went to schools to help them doing some workshops, but also lots of community groups use it to grow a food that they use later for the food banks as well. So really good story, especially I think these days when everyone's talking about the cost of food. And so I think that sort of help was very well received. I did attach a sample of the banner that I would like to use as well. So At the same time, we brought back our Regrow compost. Just want to let you know that it's the 5th year. So I think we're reaching the really good mark with our compost. It becomes more and more popular. We are ordering more and more bags. And I think residents really like it. So it's just been on sale since this week. And we're seeing at least a small meat. The few bags already disappeared. So it's good to see coming, and people really are going to hopefully carry on buying and using it. And obviously it's a brilliant story for us to talk to people that, you know, it's their own recycled garden waste, and so it all stays locally. So I think it's a good thing, and also it's a very good quality compost, and we're hearing it a lot from residents. Next point is about the contamination awareness, and I attached some infographic at the end of the report to show the overall data from last year. We would like to very much use that periodically and especially distributed internally, but I think this is something that we do need to talk to public as well, as the contamination, it is fairly high. And it brings the consequences not only for environment, but also for cost. Altogether, we're talking about just short of 500,000 could have been saved if everything been sorted correctly. So it is a quite high impact, and hopefully that infographic should be useful, and officers will be receiving them regularly. And also I would like to use it further and show it to public as well a bit more often. Okay. Any comments on so far on?
I'll get to the vapes. I do worry about those, the recycling of them in the future. Something we will look at. Okay.
Sure. Okay. So next point is the vapes recycling. We've been talking about it last time, and I must say that the subject is a little bit complicated. At the moment, it looks like that the compliance of the current vape retailers is very low. They do supposed to take it back, but at the moment it's not happening, and it looks like it could be even less compliance ahead, as there will be option to offset pay, basically, to not having the take back scheme. So the compliance could be even lower. So I think that's leaving us with unfortunate option that the only way at the moment for residents to recycle vapes is to take them to a recycling center. However, I'm hoping that on the horizon we have the WeBank, so it might be a better solution for it. But yeah, at the moment it seems like we either going to a bit more vocal about it, that it can be taken to recycling center. However, I can understand that it's very inconvenient, especially for that sort of item. But sadly, what's happening at the moment, I think, is just the awareness of the fact that actually they should not be placed to the rubbish bin. That's the biggest problem. And but yeah, solutions are very limited at the moment. So we in the a little bit of the kind of the space that we either going to wait for the potentially WeBanks, or very softly just talking to residents that they should be doing something with them and bring it alongside on the next visit to HWRC.
And it is something I do think on the agenda setting we will have to look at. One of the problems that is arising, it's the senior schools and where they're being used. And maybe if we have consciences in the future, this is something we can put on the agenda setting. Karen?
Just quickly on that, I thought I read in here, and obviously I take everything else on board with the WeBanks and also further guidance. But is there any pressure, and I think we did discuss possibly, of us contacting some of the vape distributors to encourage them locally and make our own efforts too?
Yes, I think it is the scope that we can do it. However, I've been discussing it with trading standards, and they are not the enforcing authority. So it is just the pressure that we can do. However, the expectation of the compliance, it's potentially fairly low, especially that I've been just told by training standards that it is a small caveat on the law that they could pay to offset having the take back scheme. So it all seems very odd, I might say. It is the Office of OPSS, that Office for Product Safety and Standards, that it should monitor it. And I've been in touch with them, and I'm still waiting for a formal response on that, because they are the one that they should push and pursue that subject. But it looks like, it's either being a little bit forgotten at the moment. Potentially the public health is the more priority for dealing with vapes. So it is something that I hope that, we should do it. It's just, it could be a bit of the lonely fight at the moment, but it doesn't mean that we don't need to do it. Trading Standard is going to look at this again, because obviously they are working, a few authorities are working as a partnership as well, and they will be revisiting that subject in May as well. So obviously it could be a little bit more that they could offer, but the help is there. We might do it. It's just what we're going to receive, it's a little bit unknown at the moment.
I think Damien would like to add something.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just for clarity, so retailers can pay to not receive vapes back. Is that what you're saying?
That's what Trading Standard is saying, that there could be a fee there that they can opt out of the scheme.
And who are they paying?
Office for Product Safety and Standards, I believe, or government.
And I'm assuming that money is then used to support recycling of vapes or disposal of vapes. Is it? Do we know what that money is used for? I'm
not able to answer that, but yeah, we could try to find out. I think the information is very unclear at the moment. What's happening at the moment is that I think vapes retailers do not even know that they should do it.
As I said, I'm concerned about this. This is something for the future agenda setting that we really seriously look at it. It is not just something that is collecting from adults. It is younger persons, and it's not small amounts. Not small amounts at all. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, any other questions before I move? The recommendation is just to note the report. Oh, good God, yes. Sorry, my girl.
Sorry, just have a couple more.
And the Lindsay campaign, I thought we got there.
So we talked a lot about the inclusion, and I think we're all very pleased to see that the first step has been already done when it comes to the opening up our web form towards the residents whose first language is not English. So the plan now is to make that feature a bit more standout and to advertise it to audience that potentially had not visited us due to that reason. We are going to do a bit more further research and to check the areas of low usage that had been previously mentioned. We do kind of, have suggestions for the target groups that we might be talking about, of those who potentially had not been visiting a recycling center at all. And we believe that, majority of that could be the fact that people just recently moved to the area, they live in rented and shared accommodation, so obviously they do not need the service as much. But we also would like to look at the people with low literacy level or technical skills. If during our discussion it came across that potentially people with some disability of impairment might struggle to visit us, and obviously they are deprived areas. So this is the areas that we will be taking into considerations. Unless members are having some other views on that, I would like to look at reaching out to that target audience with the offer what recycling center can help them with.
Yes, Karen.
Just want to go on record that I'm very grateful for the work that's being done here and the different advertising routes that you're trying to go down on this. I think to keep that up, and I certainly would urge you to come back to Reading Borough Council and let's work together on reaching some of those areas where we know. And I think, Andy, we've seen with some of the mapping, certainly I think there's some very clear areas that we can target. So I would ask that you have a separate conversation with us to explore that, because this is something obviously that really affected us. So I'm just very grateful for it. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone? Ladies and gentlemen, taking.
Just wanted to let members know that we are currently running the safety campaign in HWRC. This is the initiative launched by our contractor, FCC Environment. They have distributed some leaflets and business cards to residents, and the aim is to reduce any accidents. So just to report on that. And very quick, we did talked briefly last time about the anti-litter campaign. It was to use the national app called Little Lotto that incentivize people that picking up a litter. At the moment, the campaign is not gain approval of all of the partnering councils, but obviously I'm here to support any of the trial of the tool or in general support anti-litter campaign, especially now when it's the big clear up day coming up in March, and this could be utilized just as an option out there to mobilize residents to help out with dealing with litter. That's it from me. Thank you very much.
That is it now, isn't it? Mind you, when you say Little Lotto, we shouldn't have litter when we think about it, if when we come back. Anyhow, let's go to what I was trying to say earlier, is the recommendation on page 25 is to just note, I'm sure that we were pleased with the work that Monica's doing on a lot of this. It is getting the message out and taking in consideration the vapes, and the rest of it we will be looking at. Can I take it then, ladies and gentlemen? This is fine. And Reading, you will have Monica, I'm sure, coming to see you separately with regards to the other part. Yeah, and the other areas. Okay, I can take that as agreed. Yeah. Right, then we're moving on then to agenda item number 7 is the legislation report, and Oliver is giving this one. Over to you, Oliver.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be quick because I think probably people are probably fairly well versed in what the Environment Act talks about. Two of the 3 main parts have been announced, or the consultation documents have been released. We await the waste collection consistency one. So in terms of EPR, the sort of governing principle is producer pays, and fee modulation. They will be charged different fees according to the recyclability of the packaging that they put on the market. And the intention of that is to drive more recyclable packaging. We, as councils, will be paid according to the amount of waste we collect and the recyclability of it. But the other side of that coin is that our efficiency and effectiveness will be assessed against a cohort of other councils. So we'll be in a kind of best in show kind of situation. If you're not best in show, the likelihood is that the benchmarking will lead to you being given an improvement notice, and the improvement notice will come with an indication of the funding reduction that you will receive if you fail to improve according to the improvement notice. It's not going to be overnight. The indication is that will allow the councils years in which to make those improvements, but it will, as I've kind of indicated in the report, take away some of the kind of localism, the occasion for councils to make decisions that they feel are appropriate, relevant to what their residents want. It will be the central team that will decide what is efficient and what is effective. So that's EPR. DRS one is the one that's come out most recently, and I think probably everyone knows the principle of that. Important, as we note in the report, to just talk about the fact that it is drinks containers, and Monica very kindly corrected me on the logic of it is a bit crazy to me, but it is just drinks cans and tins, not all cans and tins by the looks of things, which will again just add another little for something that isn't its heart meant to be simplifying everything for residents. That feels to me like something that won't simplify things for residents. 20p deposit, and in the report we give some examples of what that will look like. On a multi-pack, it can be quite a large sum relative to the overall cost of the product you're actually buying. So that's quite important. And then finally, on waste collection consistency, it's obviously awaited, but we talk about some of the things in there that we already know about. So we know already we will have to collect glass. We know already that we will have to collect plastic films. We are already collecting all of the other materials. So as a partnership of 3 councils, we are in a really good place on those ones. But the glass and the plastic film, Sarah's talked about the trial that she's led on. So in a way, we've got plastic film, or at least we've got a potential route to go down in terms of plastic film, we hope. And glass, again, we know how that would work if we had to do it. I think more importantly on this report is some of the kind of outcomes, the potential impacts. Seems likely that there'll be a squeeze on finances because the producers are not going to want to pay what our prevailing costs are. They'll want to pay what they feel are appropriate costs. And the way that they deal with their logistics, which are obviously admirable on a national basis, you know, you drive in a lorry full of baked beans and you drive away with a lorry full of cardboard or cling film or whatever packaging, and those logistics work. But for thousands and thousands of residents who've all got different lives and different capabilities, that's not necessarily going to work in the same way as has been envisaged. Elderly and disabled, those factors are still not built into DEFRA's impact assessment, so that's a bit of a problem. Cost of living, I don't know if you picked up, but the 3 candidates to be the next SNP leader have all said that they would pause their DRS, which is ahead of the one in England. The one in Scotland is ahead. They've said they've paused it because they feel that the cost issues are a factor. Now, that may be campaigning, or it may be a fundamental feature of DRS as it is intended to be applied here. There are repercussive contract costs because, of course, what this does is it comes in at a time when we've already got agreed obligations to hit. We have a contract. Every other council has a contract for their waste disposal. 2 of the 3 councils have a contract for collection, in which there are certain things will need to change as a result of this legislation. Those contractual costs may or may not be taken into account. And then the good side of this, that idea about evolution and innovation in packaging, just presents us with another slight challenge. If we make a decision to go down a particular route of collecting X, and then that packaging becomes phased out for good reasons, that will just complicate things for us. I do end on the note with some potential positives of things that we can do, like us actually rolling out DRS machines ourselves and all those sorts of things. There's lots of really good things, and I hope really that the councils will approach the Environment Act in the vein of seeking to thrive in this new environment. But it is important to identify those things that we need to be aware of. And that's it from me, subject, Chairman, to any questions that members may have.
Do I have any questions? Yes, Karen.
Thank you, Oliver. And I mean, obviously, there's a wide range of impacts in this whole report. You mentioned something I'd like to question about clarity on glass collections, because, as you know, Reading does not do curbside glass, because we have really indeed waited for further clarification before we're going to implement a program that may not serve exactly what we're supposed to comply with. Obviously, we're eager to come on board with these systems, but you're saying that, is this going to be all the clarity we're going to get? Are we still waiting? I believe we're still waiting. Isn't that correct? And if so, when?
Well, I can't answer the last bit, unfortunately. Yeah. But I mean, it could be by lunchtime we might find it's in our inbox, or it could be 3 or 4 months' time. I mean, and I don't mean to make a joke out of that. We are awaiting it, and I suspect it probably isn't far off. The reason I can be certain about the fact that we will have to collect glass is because that was announced earlier on in the year, earlier on last year, apologies, as part of the release of information around the extended producer responsibility. So the certainty of us having to collect glass was announced. the precise conditions, and the really important point that you're getting at from the RE3 Council's point of view is what will the funding, what will the costs, what will be the precise requirements on us to collect it. That bit is what we're waiting, and that will come in the waste collection consistency element of these, which is the bit we're still waiting for.
Yes.
Curbside collection of glass is going to cost the councils money, cost you money. Are we going to get some support from the government for that? Or is that?
I was asking Oliver earlier. Go on, Oliver.
Yes, we are. The way it's going to be worked out will be based again on cohorts and based on a formula. So councils will notionally be placed into cohorts of similar councils. So the RE3 councils could all be placed, even though we work together very closely, and our costs therefore are, certainly of material treatment, are, you know, you can't get a fag paper between them. They are the same costs, but we may all end up in different cohorts. Though the formula will be based on conditions which take into account demographics. They keep mentioning, what if you're if you're a Scottish island? Great respect to Scottish Islands, but that's not a great deal. It's not a very great example of the way in which differences will be applied, because of course most councils are not Scottish Islands. But really the point they're making there is, if you're an urban council, if you're a rural council, if you're a coastal council, all sorts of different examples will impact on the funding that you receive. But then again, after that, then there is the effective and efficiency calculation, which will drive down costs, because everyone in the cohort will be compared with the best in class. And of course, only one person really can be best in class, or one council can be best in class. So you can see over a course of 5, 10, 15 years how that will work, which is undeniable. From the point of view, if you're running a supermarket, of course you want to drive down your costs. If you're running a council, of course, we're not throwing money around, but what I'm saying is we might want to have a conversation with local residents which says, do you know what, we will have a gold standard in this area because that's what you've asked for. It feels to me at the moment, and I stress feels because we wait for the detail, but it feels to me like that won't be quite as possible. That burden will be very much on the council. If you want to give that gold standard service, what else are you not going to do? Because the funding through this probably will not be a tap which gives us, as I say, I think it's not what the council's prevailing costs will be. It will be what the formula, the cohort, and the efficiency and effectiveness determines you will receive. So, Councillor Jones, in answer to your question, yes, we should receive funding to introduce glass, but we should not expect that to be 100 pence in the pound, I think is perhaps the way to put it.
Okay, so briefly, you don't think we'll get all of the money that it will cost us, and it's likely that the three councils will be treated differently, and as Wokingham always finds itself at the bottom of the pile when the government are chucking out money, then it could be a situation where we get less than Bracknell and Reading.
It could be, but again, in that instance, I almost think it's irrelevant what the other two councils in this partnership are getting, because your comparison will be with whatever cohort you're put in. I'd suggest there's an outside. I mean, when we do nearest neighbours, in some nearest neighbours, all three councils are together, and I guess that's more about proximity. In some nearest neighbours, I've seen Bracknell and Wokingham are together, but Reading is with other more urban councils. So in a way, there's a chance it could go in any direction, I suppose, at that point. But yeah, yes, I agree with everything you've just said, really.
I know Karen wants to talk before I come in.
Chair, just to this whole best in class kind of issue, it's just so negative, really, that I mean, you could sit down here and see. I mean, I think we're all three the best councils running, on and on. But you know, we could all each have a improvement notice, which doesn't reflect positively to our towns, to our communities, and it only causes communities to question that. And I was actually wondering if the chair, it's just it's the negative way to go about it. And I was wondering if the chair might be interested in supporting in writing them a letter to that effect. I mean, you know, there's a positive way to make positive change and a negative way. It's personal opinion perhaps, but.
Clive?
I was just going to make the point that I actually regard this, the thinking behind this.
Yeah, it's on.
It's on. I actually,
Yeah, it's obviously not working. I think it's working.
It is on.
They're attached.
I actually regard the thinking behind this legislation as incredibly poor, very much like the thinking behind when we were short of HGV drivers to start recommending bus drivers to go for an HGV license. It's about that kind of level of intelligence that's behind this. The more complicated we make life for residents, the less cooperation we're going to get from residents. And it's potentially an extremely negative requirement to place on councils.
Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, Chairman. I mean, again, with the preferences of members, we can certainly draft a letter. I suspect that will act more as an event for our feelings of, I would say that with a lot of respect. I don't expect government to, or DEFRA perhaps more appropriately in this case, to take an awful lot of notice about that. But I do think, you don't need a team talk from me, but I do think that the purpose of this report and the purpose of the process we're going through now needs to be one in which we kind of galvanize ourselves and get ready to prove all those current fears that we've got wrong. You know, who knows our residents better than the councils? No one. Have we shown ourselves to be creative and to do clever things in the past? Yes, we have. We've got some fantastic services just in this alone. And then, of course, you all are aware of all the other things that are going on. And in a way, perhaps that's a better direction for our energies, is to get ready to think about it really commercially and to make sure that we are in a position to thrive under this. I'll shut up at that point because, again, it'll all end up being like the kind of final 5 minutes of an American movie. But that's the way to do it. I know that's a Hollywood movie, Karen. Apologies.
Moving on then, ladies and gentlemen, I could be ranting and raving the same because it's where the three of us are really concerned about the collection of glass, the monies it'll incur and the rest of it. So therefore, I'll thank Oliver for his input on helping us. I would say that we move and agree, but agree also a draft letter that Oliver could put together for us with regards to that. Is that viable? Yes. And we can work from there. And if everyone is happy with that, that page 37, yes, thank you. That it's noted, moved and agreed that some draft letter. And can you do it before June? May. Okay, thank you. Right. Agenda item 8 includes the likelihood of disclosure of exempt information. And so we will be moving to the private section to discuss these items. May I therefore move this? And that pursuant to Regulation 4 of the Local Authorities Access Information, Regulations 2012, and having regard to the public interest, members of the public and press be excluded from the meeting from consideration of items 9 and 10, which involves the likely disclosure of exempt information under the following category of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. 3, information relating to financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. Is that seconded? Thank you. Does any member approve moving into the private section? We're okay with all of that. We're moving in.